6th January 2015.
The economy of the US is going to plunge. It's going to start a course plunging. It is going to get on that course, like going down, and it's not going to be one of those things where then it is recovered in months and then it's recovered next. It's not going to be. It's going to be one of those things that takes down the nation. Now, the reason as to why I felt its importance and to first start out here and not to lose it is the Lord, the wisdom of the Lord is, for a lack of better words, we can call it self-reliance, because they're going to be on withdrawals. Now, first of all, when I'm sharing these things, I'm not an economist. So if I don't eloquently bring out something, you understand. And yet if I speak things and you misunderstand me for being an economist, then you'll be totally messed up. Anyway, now the thing is, you should know that me, not being an economist, how would I get to know certain of those things? So you should see God beyond that. Those of you who can act, and the Lord has placed most of you in some of those positions, that you may start acting, especially the children of God, where we become a light during a time like that. So it's going to plunge, and it's going to keep going down and down and down for years. Years. And then it is actually going to start out the beginning almost of the real fall of that nation. And then the dollar, I saw a point when the dollar was a non-existent as the global force, like currency. You will see it diminish with time. And then, so now in that trend, I began to see something which again you will begin to see this year. I began to see Russia and China. You will begin to see meetings of those two, like public. They will make them public, and they will start striking an alliance together, and they will grow so strong, and they will become the voice that will be heard on the earth.
8 years later, in a shocking fulfillment of prophecy, global media was awash with reports Russia and China's alliance was overtaking the U.S. position as the dominant global superpower.
Russia's Vladimir Putin rolling out the red carpet for his, quote, dear friend, Chinese leader Xi Jinping, greeting each other for their second day of meetings in Moscow. Despite skepticism from the West that the visit is more about supporting Russia and furthering Beijing's own self-interests, Putin and Xi signing an economic deal, deepening their partnership, and calling for an end to actions that increase tensions in the prolonged war in Ukraine. By meeting with Putin, Xi wants to highlight his role as a global statesman that can offer an alternative to the current world order.
A high-stakes visit between two powerful strategic partners is being watched around the world. For the first time since Russia invaded Ukraine, China's Xi Jinping is in Moscow meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ukraine is, of course, expected to top the agenda of the three-day trip, with Beijing framing itself as a peacemaker. Mr. Xi says that China will work with Russia to, in his words, safeguard the international order.
This is about combining the powers of these two nuclear-armed authoritarian superpowers and using that combined power to shape the course of the world order.
Putin's been in power for 23 years. Xi is starting his 11th year. They have had 40 visits, counting the one that's taking place today. So this has been a long-term relationship. It actually goes back to before President Xi was head of state, when they had a number of visits during that time. The reason why they're together, the reason why they have a strategic partnership, because they both arrived at the same place independent of each other. And that place is a national interest to reduce the United States and the coalition of democratic nations' influence in the world, a position that we have held with those nations since the end of World War II. In a sense, the 20th century was the United States of America's century, along with democracy. They want to change that and have their own sphere of influence. And as such, they came together in this strategic partnership.
The prophet mentioned key signs that would mark the unfolding of this prophecy. First, months after Prophet Elvis Mbonye gave this prophecy, global news reports surfaced of a slowdown in the U.S. economy and fears of a recession in the year 2015.
U.S. domestic output slowed in the last 3 months of 2015, hurt in part by weaker growth overseas, plunging oil prices, and a strong dollar.
Economic analysis released new figures that showed our economy, our GDP, shrunk for a second straight quarter. And that's gotten some economists worried that we might be heading into a recession if we're not already in one.
So it's going to plunge, and it's going to keep going down and down and down for years.
In the years following 2015, the U.S. economy would continue to struggle, with media reports indicating a loss of its former dominance.
America is reeling from its failed war in Afghanistan. It's the latest in a catalogue of problems, from increasing social division and political paralysis at home to its seeming inability to lead a global mission to tackle climate change. This, against the backdrop of an increasingly dominant China, has led many to believe America is losing its power and standing in the world.
The way in which we think about the United States as world power needs to change. The United States no longer has the same capacity to run the world that it used to.
The wisdom of the Lord is, for a lack of better words, we can call it self-reliance, because they're going to be on withdrawals.
1 month after the prophecy was given, a series of donor cancellations to Uganda swept major news headlines, true to the prophetic word.
The World Bank has cancelled a $265 million road project in Uganda.
There'll be no new lending from the development partner to the government of Uganda.
The dollar, I saw a point when the dollar was a non-existent as the what? The global force, like currency. You will see it diminish.
6 years later, global news was bustling with reports of the US dollar losing its position as the global reserve and trading currency, a status that had been undisputed for almost a century in an astounding fulfillment of prophecy.
Our currency is crashing and will soon no longer be the world standard, which will be our greatest defeat, frankly, in 200 years. There will be no defeat like that. That will take us away from being even a great power.
And while the U.S. has long relied on its status as the world's reserve currency, countries like China and Russia have been taking steps to pull away from the U.S. dollar.
The prophecy then mentioned Russia and China striking an alliance to the point where their meetings would be made public. The major highlights that characterized the year 2015 was multiple meetings between China and Russia, true to the detail of the prophetic word. 8 years later, their cooperation grew to a point where their global influence started challenging the U.S. for their position as a global superpower.
In a double blow for Washington, its trade war with Beijing has further brought Russia and China closer as they seek to forge deeper economic ties. Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping met in Moscow to decide, among other things, how to defang America's chosen weapon, the dollar. Looks like they're dumping it.
Describing their talks, Putin said, "We are in favor of using the Chinese yuan for settlements between Russia and the countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The world's second largest economy and its largest energy exporter are together actively trying to dent the dollar's dominance as the anchor of the international financial system."
Prophet Elvis Mbonye revealed this alliance would grow so powerful that their voice would be the one heard in the earth. True to the word of the prophecy, their impact was so global that other major nations would start to join them in stepping away from the US dollar as the dominant trade currency.
The dollar is facing a revolt. The world knows it as the king of currencies, but the dominance of the dollar is now under threat. More and more countries are looking for alternatives, and China's yuan is emerging as a clear challenger.
This and countless other prophetic fulfillments continue to exhibit Prophet Elvis Mbonye as one with a truly global authority, and we accord double honor to Prophet Elvis Mbonye.